You and I, we have been given the greatest gift in the last 5,000 years of human history. We've been given a constitution that recognizes our inalienable rights. Our rights come from God and not government, and we instituted a government to secure our rights. And our founders knew that we needed the tools to hold that government accountable. Our founders knew that knowledge is power. And they recognized the power of transparency, and they wrote it into our founding documents. And it's Article 1, Section 9 of the U.S. Constitution, and it states that a regular statement and account of the receipts and expenditures of all public money shall be published from time to time. Today, there's a simple interpretation. Post every dime online in real time. Open the books. Our vision is to empower regular people where they live with the information to hold the political class accountable for tax and spend decisions. You and I, we have a lot of work to do to simply open the books and hold the administrator accountable. But consider this. The federal swamp is dwarfed by the state and local swamps. But there are 2 million public employees across the entire country at the federal, state, and local level. They make six figures, $100,000 a year. There's 2 million of them. 400,000 are at the federal level, and 1.6 million of them are in our own backyards at the state and local level. So we have a lot of work to do. And you and I need the tools to be able to hold our elected officials accountable locally for tax and spend decisions. We are giving you free tools to do that. All 23 million public employees' salaries are in a free mobile app for Apple and Android called Open the Books. It takes the entire payroll file of the country, localizes it to your zip code so you can see who, by name, for what unit of government makes how much money. We can't complain about Washington, D.C. unless we have good government where we live. And we need to start fact-checking our local politicians on their promises. You and I, we have a lot of work to do. In 2013, we sued Republican comptroller in Illinois, Judy Bartopinka. Topinka said that the state doesn't have a magical checkbook. And we reminded Topinka that the state doesn't have magical taxpayers either. The elites in this country have gamed the system for their political power and their personal benefit. And you know this. This is a message that resonates across the entire political spectrum. The disruptors in 2016 for president, you had Bernie Sanders on the left and Donald Trump on the right, and they ran on eerily similar campaign messages. That the system is rigged, and it's rigged for insiders. And at OpenTheBooks.com, we show you by shining a white-hot spotlight just how bad it is. You tell me what government program is running well. You can't make America great again unless you make America accountable again. We encourage the president to embrace the transparency revolution, declare war on waste, and as Commander-in-Chief, defend the American taxpayer against waste, fraud, corruption, and taxpayer abuse. First prong, open and audit all spending. Second prong, cut 5%. It's a modest goal, and then keep going. In 1982, the Grace Commission under President Reagan identified 1 out of every $3 was waste, and it's probably worse today. Prong 3, mobilize the federal workforce. They know where the bodies are buried. Bodies are buried. We need a transparency revolution. We need a war on waste. Prong 4. The president's really good at this one. Communicate with the American people. Keep us updated on the progress of the transparency revolution. Use Twitter. The president will find it's a target-rich environment to cut waste. Here's the first big area where he can go. Federal grant making. Last year, incredibly, $700 billion. $700 billion billion went out the door on subsidies, grants, and giveaways. Our team did an oversight report called Where's the Pork? Here are just some of our findings. $200,000 created a new mobile app to help Chinese children cross their busy streets. $700,000 to a senior center outside Boston, Massachusetts to teach the seniors Tai Chi. A $1.1 million outreach to prepare the nation's religions for the discovery of extraterrestrial life. $1.4 million funded sex education for California prostitutes who could have probably taught the class. $20 million went to the airport on Martha's Vineyard, the playground for the East Coast money elites and the Hollywood superstars. They can pay their own way. We need a transparency revolution. We need a war on waste. Here's the second vertical that the president can concentrate on: improper and mistaken payments. Here's the definition of an improper payment: a payment to the wrong person, or in the wrong amount, or under the wrong set of federal rules, or all of the above. Let's just start with the $1 billion paid to dead people last year. $1 billion paid to dead people last year. People that had a death certificate on file with the federal agencies, the agencies admit to continuing to pay them nearly $1 billion. The Social Security Administration admits that last year alone they overpaid $10 billion. Last year alone they overpaid $10 billion. $10 billion. Social Security also admits that they have 6 million active Social Security numbers of people aged 112 and over. There's only 40 people aged 112 and over in the entire world. The IRS overpaid $18.4 billion last year. Medicare and Medicaid admit last year they paid $67 billion in overpayments. $67 billion in overpayments. And Democratic presidential candidate Bernie Sanders wants Medicare for all. He wants to put that program on steroids. Really? We need a war on waste, we need a transparency revolution, and we need to challenge and change the culture of corruption in Washington, D.C. Here's the third spending vertical the president can concentrate on, and that's the year-end use it or lose it spending phenomenon. The federal fiscal year ends in September. It is Christmas in September for federal contractors. Our organization did an oversight report of the 67 federal agencies that we found spent $100 billion in the last month of the fiscal year, spending down their budgets this year so they'll get the same or more money from Congress next year. And here's some of the ways they spent down their budgets. We found $300 million spent down the vehicle budget. We found $460 million spent by the agencies on redecorating and on furniture. We found $500 million, $500 million spent by the agencies on PR. That's public relations, spending down their marketing, promotion, and advertising budgets. And I can tell you nothing rankles taxpayers more than spending taxpayer money to convince taxpayers to spend even more taxpayer money on a larger size and scope of government. The Pentagon, the Department of Defense, spent $62 billion in the last month of the fiscal year. It was $1 out of every $4 or $5 that they spent on contracting on the year they spent in the last month of the year. We found they spent $9,300 on a club leather chair. They spent $1 million on PBR, the Professional Bull Riders Association. The Pentagon spent down their lobster tail and snow crab budget, spending $4.6 million. $4.6 million in the last month on lobster tail and snow crab. And so we dug a little deeper. And when we reached out for comment, the Pentagon admitted to spending $25 million on lobster tail and snow crab over an 18-month period. The Pentagon was spending up to $1,218 on expensive coffee cups. Senator Chuck Grassley picked that up, wrote an oversight letter to the Department of Defense. He got the program stopped, but they admitted they had spent $350,000 on that program of expensive coffee cups. And I'd feel a lot better about all of this spending at the Department of Defense if they could pass their audit. The audit of the Pentagon's been on the books for decades, but nobody enforced it. Well, President Trump did enforce it. He mandated it. The Pentagon spent a year. There was 1,200 auditors. They spent $400 million on the audit, and the Pentagon flunked it. We need a transparency revolution. We need to challenge the culture of corruption in Washington, D.C. In 2017, our organization launched our oversight report of the Ivy League colleges. And I know of no better example of the depth of the swamp, the true size, scope, and power of the federal government. Here's what we found. Over the 6 years of our report, the 8 schools of the Ivy League collected $42 billion of U.S. taxpayers' subsidies, special tax breaks, and direct federal payments on contracts and grants. We compared the Ivy League's federal contracting business on the direct receipt of federal contracts and grants at $25 billion versus their educational mission. They only collected $22 billion worth of undergraduate student tuition in the 6-year period. They are more federal contractor today than they are educator. And we found a lot of taxpayer abuse in their federal grants. 2 examples. Cornell University, they took $1 million on a study where it hurts the most to be stung by a bee. Columbia University, they took $5.6 million to create fake voicemails from the year 2065 describing the world after it's been decimated by climate change. The Ivies can't make the argument that they need taxpayer subsidies. They have a collective endowment of $120 billion. So here's our conclusion. There is no public purpose for working class taxpayers, for middle class taxpayers, for any of us to subsidize the wealthy Ivy League. So let's compare the Ivy League at $25 billion in the receipt of federal grants and contracts over this 6-year period versus Hillsdale College over the same 6-year period. We fact-checked the Hillsdale promise of no federal money, and guess what? It's true. They're not in the federal checkbook. $0. That's what we call an American miracle. As many of you know, I'm from Illinois, and it is the Super Bowl of corruption. In Illinois, our #1 manufactured product is corruption, and our governors are famous. You know, at one point we had 4 out of the last 9 governors that had been convicted and had served time in the federal penitentiary. In 2013, we actually had 2 governors in federal prison at the same time, one from each party. It was Republican George Ryan and Democrat Rod Blagojevich. And I remember when Rahm Emanuel promised to clean up the city of Chicago. In 2011, Rahm Emanuel ran for mayor of this city on 2 promises: to end pay-to-play, to end the historic culture of corruption in City Hall. Pay-to-play is when you give campaign cash and expect to receive a government contract. And sure enough, after Emanuel won for mayor, he issued an executive order prohibiting city contractors from giving him campaign cash. In 2015, the Emmy Award-winning journalist John Stossel called me. Rahm was running for re-election, and Stossel asked me if we could fact-check the mayor's promises. And I said, yes, we can. And here's what we found. 600 city contractors gave Rahm Emanuel $7 million of campaign cash, and those contractors had reaped $2 billion in city payments. In God we trust, Illinois politicians we must audit. I am hopeful and optimistic about our future, despite the corruption in Illinois and across the country. My name is Adam Andrzejewski, and I founded OpenTheBooks.com on the simple vision to capture and post online every dime taxed and spent at every level of government across the entire country. That's at the federal level, the state level, and the local level. And our honorary chairman is the former legendary U.S. Senator from Oklahoma, Dr. Tom Coburn. In 2013, Coburn made the Time 100 Most Influential Persons in the World list, and we are privileged to be locked arm in arm fighting these battles in the same trench with Dr. Tom Coburn. We've had a lot of success capturing data. We are the world's largest private database of public sector expenditures. And here's what our database is comprised of. At the federal level, since the year 2001, all disclosed federal spending. At the state level, 49 out of 50 state checkbook spending, most going back 10 or a dozen years. At the local level, in 50,000 of the most substantial public bodies in the country, for the first time in U.S. history, we've compiled virtually every single public employee's salary record at every level of government. Last year, we compiled records from 23 million public employees' salary and pension records. When candidate Donald Trump won for president, here's what we found at the federal level. We did an oversight report called Mapping the Swamp, a study of the administrative state. And we found that the federal bureaucracy is very expensive. It's $1 million a minute. It's $500 million a day. It's $1 million a minute. It's $500 million a day. We found a new minimum wage in 78 of the largest federal agencies. And the minimum wage, the average pay is $100,000 today for a federal bureaucrat. But it's not even about the salary. They get performance bonuses. Our auditors found that the agencies gave out 1 million performance bonuses to bureaucrats, costing taxpayers $1.1 billion. 1 million performance bonuses to bureaucrats, costing taxpayers $1.1 billion. And that shocks most people. They don't know how 1 million federal bureaucrats can qualify for a performance bonus. Most people don't think government's running that well.
They're bureaucrats. I don't respect them.
So we dug deeper and we found that 99.6% of the federal bureaucrats are rated fully successful. And that's actually impossible. They're highly compensated on salary, they get performance bonuses, and they also get paid time off. If you hit your 3-year anniversary as a federal bureaucrat, you get incredibly 43 days of paid time off. That's 8.5 weeks. We estimate that small benefit costs the American taxpayers $20 billion a year, $20 billion a year, 43 days of paid time off. That's 8.5 weeks. Little poll of the room. Who receives 8.5 weeks of paid time off? 8.5 weeks of paid time off.
They're bureaucrats. I don't respect them.
We also have transparency problems because the federal bureaucracy gets pensions. Except you and I, we help fund those pensions. We guarantee those pensions. And you and I don't get to see those pensions. You see, under existing Federal Freedom of Information Act law, when a bureaucrat retires or you're a member of Congress, their retirement payout is considered private information, and we need to change that law. Those performance bonuses, we know there's 1 million of them, but I can't tell you who received them. The transparency was negotiated away. The performance bonuses are shielded from disclosure because of the union contracts. So we have a lot of work to do on pay and pensions. Here's another transparency problem. You know, we mapped the swamp that the president inherited from the Obama administration, And we were upset because there was 3,500 names and salaries redacted from the responsive record. And then in 2017, we filed our request, we got the information, and 255,000 names and salaries were redacted, and we estimated $20 billion was hidden in the swamp. The swamp was fighting back. We got the 2018 federal executive payroll through the door, and 350,000 names were redacted. We estimate we don't know who received $30 billion worth of federal payroll. We don't know who received $30 billion worth of federal payroll. You and I, we have a lot of work to do to simply open the books and hold the administrator accountable. In Florida, in the small town of Dana Beach, the city attorney, for 2 years, made over $400,000 out earning every president ever. In Chicago, the tree trimmers lop off 6 figures up to $105,000. In LA County in Los Angeles, the lifeguards, they can earn up to $365,000 as lifeguards. In the New York City public schools, the school district janitors out-earn the principals because of the union contract. The janitors are making up to $200,000 a year.
The hell are you supposed to be?
I'm vengeance.
In San Francisco, there was a new candidate running for mayor, London Breed, and she was promising to literally clean up the streets of San Francisco. You see, in San Francisco, there are 8,000 homeless people, and it's a crisis. And many of those people are defecating on city streets. She promised to clean up the streets. Our team decided to fact-check her programs to see how she was doing. And here's what we found. We literally mapped the San Francisco Human Waste Challenge. It was international news. We took 9 years of case reports of human waste in the public way. We put it on our map. And in 2011, there was 5,000 cases. In 2015, there was 13,000 cases. In 2017, there was 21,000 cases. Then 28,000. In 2019, there was 31,000 cases of human waste in the public way. We mapped 140,000 cases over a 9-year period. And that is a human health catastrophe. I don't have to tell you that California has a lot of problems. Every year, our auditors file state checkbook requests. That's for the line-by-line state expenditures in all 50 states, and we're able to collect 49 out of 50 states. Only California has rejected our request. California Comptroller Betty Yee rejected our request this year, oddly saying that she couldn't locate, her words, any of the 49 million individual bills she paid last year. She spent over $300 billion, and $100 billion of that came back from Washington, D.C. That's our money in the Golden State. We deserve to be able to follow the money. And so we sued Betty Yee this year to begin the process of forcing open the California state checkbook expenditures. In 2018, we sued Republican State Auditor Cynthia Cloud in Wyoming. Cloud said it would take years and years to produce a state checkbook. So we sued her, and within 10 months, we had 6 years worth of line-by-line expenses. We have never lost a state checkbook transparency fight, and we expect to win in the state of California as well. When we open the books in California, what do you think we'll find? Well, here's the first project that we're going to do. We're going to take Governor Gavin Newsom's campaign donor disclosures, we're going to mash it up with the state checkbook vendor list, and we're going to see if Governor Newsom is soliciting campaign cash from state vendors, because that would be highly unethical. We did this in Oregon. Governor Kate Brown solicited 557 state vendors for $2.6 million in campaign cash, and those vendors had reaped $4.6 billion in state payments. We're going to break news right now. In March, we're coming out with the same report on Governor Andrew Cuomo in the state of New York. Here's our preliminary findings. Preliminary findings show that 337 state vendors were solicited for $4.6 million worth of campaign cash, and those vendors had received $6.3 billion worth of New York state payments. You tell me, what government program is running well? Could it be farm subsidies in urban areas where there are no farms? We did an oversight report of the federal farm subsidies flowing into New York City, Washington, D.C., and Chicago. And my favorite story comes out of Chicago. The Reverend Minister Louis Farrakhan, the founder of the Nation of Islam, is a farmer. In a 17-year period, to his home in Hyde Park, $317,000 worth of farm subsidies were mailed. What government program is running well? Let's take a look at an obscure federal agency called the Small Business Administration. You know the SBA. They're supposed to be funding mom and pop businesses on Main Street. Those men and women that have good ideas but can't find financing in the private marketplace. In a 5-year period, we found $110 million flowing into zip code 90210, and that's Beverly Hills, California. It was $1.75 million worth of low-cost, taxpayer-backed financing that flowed to their French wine importer. $2.1 million flowed to Diva Limousine, and they shuttle the stars and starlets in Hollywood. And $2.2 million flowed into their eyeglass designers, whose frames are worn by Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise. And $4 million worth of cheap financing backed by taxpayers went to the Beverly Hills exclusive Diamond Broker. Since 2007, our team has quantified $300 million flowed to America's private country clubs, golf clubs, swim clubs, beach clubs, tennis clubs, and yacht clubs across the country. We found that in a 5-year period, $14 billion didn't go to Main Street, it went to Wall Street with no transparency after that. Now in America, we must never demonize success, but you and I, we shouldn't subsidize it either. So you tell me, what government program is running well? Could it be healthcare? The rising cost of healthcare is crushing the American dream. You know, last year, the average family across the country paid $20,000 on health insurance premiums, deductibles, and out-of-pocket costs. And so we did an oversight report of the 82 largest nonprofit public charity hospital groups across the country. And we found that these nonprofit hospitals, these public charities, are making huge profits. These nonprofits, in 1 year, our auditors found $40 billion worth of net asset increase in 1 year. And that's the definition of gaming the system. Pocketing $40 billion as a nonprofit in 1 year without paying a dime's worth of federal income tax. And it gets a little worse. The pay to their CEOs. Ascension Healthcare in St. Louis, it was $59 million to their CEO over a 4-year period. Kaiser Permanente in Oakland, California, it was $29.8 million over a 4-year period. It was Banner Healthcare in Phoenix, Arizona, $27 million. In Illinois, Advocate Healthcare, $27 million went to their CEO over a 4-year period. Public charities are supposed to be about public service. And if you're going to be an executive at a public charity non-for-profit, you shouldn't have a compensation package that rivals Wall Street investment bankers. So what government program is running well? Could it be Veterans Affairs? So you remember in 2014, the scandal at Veterans Affairs, where up to 1,000 sick veterans died while waiting to see a doctor because there weren't enough doctors and they were placed on waiting lists. And the scandal broke at the Phoenix facility, the VA facility in Phoenix, Arizona, where up to 40 veterans died while waiting to see a doctor. And we took a look at the payroll numbers at that time, and there was 3,100 employees in Phoenix at the VA, but only 226 doctors. So Congress threw billions of dollars at the VA. And since 2015, we've fact-checked what the VA has done with the money. They've actually added to the payroll headcount 36,000 positions, but less than 3,000 of those positions are doctors. And the average veteran today still waits 70 days to see a doctor because there aren't enough doctors. And this can't be the end of the story. Our veterans, they deserve basic health care. They fought for us, and we need to fight for them. During the scandal in 2014, our team at OpenTheBooks.com, we forensic audited the VA checkbook, and this is what we found. Coded as furniture was $20 million worth of high-end luxury artwork. It was Christmas trees priced like cars. 27-foot Christmas trees costing $21,000. It was sculptures priced like 5-bedroom homes. At a Palo Alto VA facility in California that treats blind veterans, we found they purchased 2 fancy sculptures for $700,000. $700,000. And our findings rocketed to Good Morning America and ABC News, and they were picked up by Chuck Grassley, who wrote an oversight letter to the VA, then Secretary Robert McDonald. And within 34 days after national airing on national news, the VA Secretary apologized for the purchases and instituted new rules to stop the practice of purchasing high-end luxury art on a go-forward basis. And that's the power of transparency. And that's the power of transparency. You can't make America great again unless you make America accountable again. $23.2 trillion worth of national debt. Shocking. Every day we add $4 billion to the national debt. Year over year, this year we're going to rack up $1 trillion national debt. That's shocking. We investigated Congress, and last fall on the Tucker Carlson show, we launched our findings. Our report was called The Congressional Favor Factory. We took a look at 4 powerful Republican congressmen and 4 powerful members of Congress on the Democratic side. Here's just one example. Out of Nashville, Tennessee, Democratic Congressman Jim Cooper. He's a powerful member of Congress. He sits on U.S. House Oversight and Government Reform, and he's a member of the Budget Committee, where they carve up the budget. His #1 campaign contributor is based in his district, and it's the executives, chancellor, key employees, and key executives at Vanderbilt University. Those people have given him over $135,000 worth of campaign cash, helping him get reelected. They've also employed him. For 12 years, he was an adjunct professor and made total compensation of $250,000. And Vanderbilt University, just in the last 5 years, has reaped $2.3 billion worth of federal payments. So here's what we found. We found that it's completely legal today to be a large federal contractor based in a congressman's district, helping him get reelected, employing him, and reaping billions of dollars out of the federal treasury. Congress needs to crack down on the ethics laws. These conflicts of interest must end. A former disgraced and convicted Congressman, Jesse Jackson Jr. Before Jesse Jackson Jr. was indicted, he claimed that Congress made him mentally ill. He qualified for federal disability benefits and Social Security benefits. This total benefit between the 2 programs, one of the programs is tax-free, but he's getting a total benefit of about $120,000 to $130,000 a year. And the thinking is he's still getting it. So he's collected nearly $1 million over this period of federal disability benefits because Congress made him mentally ill. There needs to be reforms in these areas. Congress needs to crack down on the ethics laws. These conflicts of interest must end. Congress in 2019 was the #1 most wasteful federal expenditure. They spent $1.3 billion running Congress and all their subcommittees and everything else, but they were only in session for 850 hours on the year. They're lazy on the budget bills. Think about this. Speaker Pelosi dropped a 2,318-page spending bill, spending $1.4 trillion. They dropped the bill a couple of days ahead of Christmas, 24 hours before they voted on it. And it was written by lobbyists. It contained all kinds of pork and taxpayer giveaways. Nobody even knew what was in it. There was no time to read it when they passed it. The Senate passed it, sent it to the president. He's under impeachment. It's a couple of days before Christmas. He felt boxed in, so he signed it. And look, it's not representative government in Congress if you don't know what you're voting on. We need to raise our voice. We need to call our member of Congress, and we need to ask them, how, where specifically are you defending the United States taxpayer against waste, fraud, corruption, and abuse? The president has tipped his re-election messaging. Quote, America will never be a socialist country. President Trump has saved taxpayers $20 million on a leaner White House payroll. We found no evidence of czars. The payroll of the First Lady is half the previous First Lady, so he is leading by example. His payroll headcount in his first year, he was down 100 employees. He's still down about 40 employees versus the same period underneath the Barack Obama administration. And the president has, specifically at the VA, worked with Congress on a bipartisan basis to try to reform the civil service laws to be able to fire bad employees. The president is doing more with less. The president's budget delivers a path to balance the budget over 15 years. 6 times in the Wall Street Journal and USA Today, we published an open letter to President Donald Trump. The second page was 100 outrageous examples of federal taxpayer abuse. We encouraged the president to embrace the transparency revolution, declare war on waste, and as Commander-in-Chief, defend the American taxpayer against waste, fraud, corruption, and taxpayer abuse. I received a call from the White House, and they said that for the first time in our nation's history, included in the president's budget to Congress is a chapter on the elimination of wasteful spending. And they said that our oversight work at openthebooks.com had helped inspire that chapter. They sent me a copy of it, and the president recognized in that chapter the following. This is really important. Quote, a bloated, duplicative, and wasteful federal government is a threat to America's future. And that's really good news. We called for a transparency revolution, and in the president's budget to Congress, he commits to oversight resources on every single federal spending program. We called for a war on waste, and the president is declaring war on waste. We called for 5% cuts in the agencies, and the president's budget adopted that cut. We called for the elimination of improper payments, and the president is committed to it. We called for the end of use it or lose it year-end spending. The president cited in his budget our organization by name, bullet-pointed our findings, and hyperlinked and footnoted our oversight report on our website. We do need Operation Drain the Swamp. The president does need to focus on the federal bureaucracy. A lot more needs to be done, so we have a lot of work to do. All 23 million public employees' salaries are in a free mobile app called Open the Books, so you can see who, by name, for what unit of government makes how much money. We live the heavy boot of a corrupt government at all levels, and we need to start fact-checking our local politicians on their promises. You and I, we have a lot of work to do. The founders of our country feared government, and that's because the accountability mechanism oftentimes is shattered. But that's why I fight so hard, because if we're going to be taxed and if they're going to spend it, we deserve to see it, be able to follow it, and hold them accountable for honest, clean, and effective spending. We need a war on waste. We need a transparency revolution. We believe that transparency is revolutionizing United States public policy and politics, and we need to challenge and change the culture of corruption in Washington, D.C. Join us. Join the transparency revolution. If you feel depressed, fight the urge. We're Americans, and we have a fighting spirit, and this is our moment.